What happens when the lines blur? The line between what the mind can invent and what the soul can endure. Between a sickness of the brain and an invasion from something else. For most of modern history, science and medicine have provided the answers. They give us labels for our afflictions and prescriptions for our pain. But what do you do when the symptoms defy explanation? When a human body exhibits impossible strength? When a voice speaks in ancient languages it has never learned, with a hatred that feels older than time itself? You turn to a different kind of expert. A soldier in a war that most of us have forgotten is even being fought. The doctor whose practice is not in a clinic, but in the shadowed corners of human despair. Today we tell the story of a man who stood on that line. A man who looked into the abyss more than 10,000 times and never once blinked. This is the story of Father Gabriele Amorth, the Vatican's Chief Exorcist. The year is 1986. Father Gabriele Amorth is 61 years old, an age when most men think of retirement, of quiet days and tending to their garden. His life had been full, but his greatest and darkest work was yet to begin. He was summoned by a high-ranking cardinal in Rome. The conversation was casual, almost dismissive. But at the end of it, the cardinal handed him a piece of paper. It was an official appointment, written with a casual scribble that belied its immense weight. He was to become the assistant to Rome's only sanctioned exorcist, an aging and frail priest named Father Candido Amantini. Just like that, without warning or ceremony, Gabriele Amorth's true career began. He was now an apprentice in one of the oldest and most terrifying trades in human history. To understand the man who would fight demons, you must first understand the man he was before. Gabriele Amorth was born in Modena, Italy in 1925. A city now famous for fast cars and fine food, but with a hidden history of witch trials and inquisitions. He grew up in a household that was both deeply religious and politically active. As a teenager, when his country was torn apart by the Second World War, he wasn't a passive observer. He was a fighter. He rejected the call to join the fascist army, went into hiding, and emerged as a resistance fighter in the mountains. By the age of 20, he was a battalion commander, a leader of men in real-world combat, handy with a rifle and unafraid of death. He was arrested, sentenced to death by firing squad, and reportedly slipped through their grasp time and again. This was not a man who was easily intimidated. This was a warrior, forged in fire and steel, long before he ever wore a priest's collar. After the war, he studied law and became active in politics, working alongside a man who would one day become Prime Minister of Italy. A life of power and influence was open to him. But a different path was calling him, a quieter, more profound vocation. In 1954, he was ordained as a Catholic priest. For 30 years, his life was that of a normal priest. He was devoted to his faith, particularly to the stories of miracles and Marian apparition. But the world of exorcism, that was a dark, almost medieval, forgotten corner of the church, until the day he was chosen, under the mentorship of the frail Father Amantini. Amorth had to learn the rules of this invisible. Quickly discovered that the real work wasn't shouting prayers at a convulsing body. It was discernment. It was investigation. The first lesson was humility. Amorth would later state that over 98% of the cases brought to him were not demonic possession. They were profound human suffering that had a name: schizophrenia, psychosis, severe depression, epilepsy. His first duty, he learned, was not to fight a demon, but to ensure a person found the right medical doctor or psychiatrist. He became a gatekeeper, protecting the vulnerable from a ritual they did not need. But what about the other 2%? What was the open door that allowed something else to get in? According to Amorth, these entities were opportunistic. They looked for a crack in the soul's foundation. He believed the most common entry points were curses, spells, or direct invitation through occult practices like satanic rites or even, in his view, the seemingly innocent use of a Ouija board. A moment of spiritual vulnerability could become a permanent infestation. Once that door was open, the signs would begin to manifest. And this was the second lesson: how to distinguish a true possession from a severe mental illness. This was the first and most critical test, the investigation. Amorth looked for the signs that medicine struggled to explain. Some could be mistaken for illness, a sudden, violent change in behavior, unexplained pain. But other signs were harder to dismiss. Display of inhuman strength, a small, frail woman overpowering several grown men, speaking or understanding languages they've never been exposed to. Ancient Greek, Latin, Aramaic. He called this a telltale sign, as these were the languages of the early church. The revelation of hidden knowledge. The possessed person might know secrets about the people in the room, sins or private shames that no one else could possibly know. This was a common psychological weapon used to destabilize the exorcist and the family. And the most telling sign, a violent, visceral reaction to anything sacred. The mere mention of a holy name could trigger a fit of rage. Touch of a crucifix could feel like a hot iron. Sprinkling holy water on their skin could provoke screams as if they'd been burned. If these signs were present, the process continued with a diagnostic exorcism, a prayer service designed to provoke a reaction. Only after every medical possibility was exhausted, and with the official permission of a bishop, could the rite of exorcism truly begin. So what did he see? In a career spanning 30 years and acclaimed 70,000 exorcism rites, what did Father Amorth witness in those quiet rooms where cameras and reporters were forbidden? He often said that the film The Exorcist was his best publicity, but that it was largely Hollywood exaggeration. Heads don't spin 360 degrees. But the reality he described was, in its own way, even more chilling for its subtlety and psychological cruelty. He spoke of the physical manifestations, inexplicable drops in room temperature, sudden and foul odors with no source, and the appearance of objects. He spoke of an 11-year-old boy who, in a fit of rage, threw 7 grown men across a room. He told of patients spitting, not just saliva, but objects. In one case, after a woman spat into his hand, he opened it to find it filled with twisted, rusted metal nails. He recalled others producing glass shards or even small radio components from their mouths, one piece at a time. Did they levitate? Amorth claimed it was extremely rare, something out of a horror film, but that he had seen it happen twice. On another occasion, he witnessed something even stranger, an elderly woman possessed, moving on the walls like a reptile. But the most profound battles were not physical. They were psychological. They were fought with words. And then there was the voice. He learned that the entities do not like to talk. To speak is to be identified. Silence is their shield. But when forced by the prayers of the ritual, they would speak. Often with a voice that didn't belong to the host. A voice that was ancient, guttural, and filled with a cold intellectual hate. Amorth would demand their name, a key step in the ritual to gain authority over them. They would often lie, claiming to be Satan himself, Lucifer, or Beelzebub. But sometimes they would reveal their numbers. We are 3, one might say. Another, we are an army. This was the world Gabriele Amorth stepped into every single day. A world of violence, of psychological torment, and a phenomena that defied rational explanation. When journalists asked him if he was ever afraid of Satan, his reply was always the same, delivered with the calm confidence of a seasoned soldier. Absolutely not. It is he who is afraid of me. In 2016, near the end of his life, Amorth did something unprecedented. He broke his own rule and allowed a filmmaker, William Friedkin, the very director of The Exorcist, to film a real exorcism. The subject was an Italian woman named Christina. This would be her 9th session with Father Amorth. The footage is raw and disturbing. Christina thrashes in her chair, held down by several assistants. Her body contorts into unnatural position. Her voice is not her own. She screams and snarls with a rage that seems to come from the depths of hell. Father Amorth, now a frail man of 90, is the calm center of the storm. He is unfazed, almost casual. He taunts the entity, telling it in Italian, "Shut up, you aren't worth a cigarette butt." He is completely in command. He commands the demon in Latin to state its name and to leave her body. The voice from Christina snarls back in Italian, "Never." According to the filmmaker, Christina had never studied Latin. Amorth then asks how many demons are inside her. The voice, now sounding eerily layered, as if many are speaking at once, replies with chilling authority, "We are armies, armies." The session ends. Amorth later confided to Friedkin that this case was particularly difficult. In a previous session, the entity had recited all of Amorth's past sins back to him, secrets known only to the priest and his own confessor. It was a desperate attempt to break his will. He was never able to finish his work with Christina. Her family, frightened by the entity's threats, cut off contact. Amorth's own health was failing. A few months later, Father Gabriele Amorth died from pneumonia at the age of 91. A warrior on the front lines until the very end. So, what are we to make of this? In a world of science and reason, how do we process the life of Gabriele Amorth? Psychiatry offers a compelling explanation. Dissociative identity disorder, OID, a state where the mind, under extreme trauma, fractures into separate personalities called alters. This can explain the voice changes, the memory gaps, the violent behavior, even the adoption of a new malevolent persona. There is also the nocebo effect, the dark twin of the placebo. If a person truly believes they are cursed or possessed, their mind can create the physical symptoms to match that belief. The human brain is the most powerful and mysterious object we know of, capable of creating both heaven and hell within its own confine. These are powerful, rational explanations. And for 98% of cases, they are likely the correct ones. And yet some psychiatrists and scientists, those who have witnessed these cases up close, admit that mental illness cannot explain everything. Not always. They cannot easily explain the impossible strength, the knowledge of unlearned, ancient languages, or the materialization of objects. They stand at the edge of their own understanding, in a place where psychology meets something else. The story of Father Amorth forces us to stand on that uncomfortable line between two worlds. It pushes us to confront the possibility that the map of reality drawn by science might have uncharted territories. Is it a battle for the soul, waged against ancient malevolent forces that see humanity as a plaything? Or is it a battle within the mind, a testament to the profound and terrifying power of human consciousness to shatter and reshape itself? Perhaps in the end, the real horror is that we can never be entirely sure. The darkest corners of the universe may not be in the cold void between the stars, but in the silent, unexplored space behind our own eyes. And it was in that uncertainty, in that darkness, that Father Amorth chose to spend his life, holding a single candle against the night.